When will you apologize for stealing my handbag? You claim you're working remotely, but you're holed up in your room all the time. It's suffocating having you around. I want you out of this house. A thief like you should move out immediately. That's right, Mom. You must feel uneasy having a thief in the house every day. A while ago, my mother-in-law Sharon lost her handbag, and it was hidden in my room, making it look like I stole it. Of course, I didn't steal it. It's probably my sister-in-law Margaret, who is always hanging around the house, who set this up. I've had enough of dealing with such in-laws. Thinking that, I started making a plan with my husband John. And now, when Sharon told me to move out, I replied, "Yes. I've already completed the moving procedures. I'm packing my things now." What? I ignored the surprised Sharon and Margaret and left the house. The next day, Sharon called my smartphone furiously. "I am Ashley. I'm a 35-year-old office worker, married for 2 years. I was raised in a single-mother household, where my mother taught me not to waste money, and I've always followed her teachings. Even as an adult, this hasn't changed. Saving money has been a hobby of mine since I was single, and I love saving diligently. When my mother passed away while I was still in college, I lived alone at home while working part-time. After graduating, I started working at a company and also got interested in blogging as a side job, which I've been doing steadily for about 10 years. Then, I married John, who was 2 years older than me in college, and for the past 2 years, I've been living with Sharon at my in-laws' house. My father-in-law passed away a few years before we got married. But Sharon, who just turned 70, is still energetic. The reason we started living together was actually on our side. Before getting married, we had a dream of building a house together, and once that dream was realized, we planned to move out of my in-laws' house. In other words, we were living together to save on living expenses, and Sharon understood that. Sharon would rather live with her daughter, Margaret. Margaret, who is 33, got married 7 years ago and lives nearby. She has a 6-year-old son, Edward, who goes to preschool and often visits US with Edward after dropping him off. Well, since I'm at work during that time, it doesn't really bother me. I understand that Margaret wants to visit her own home whenever she likes. I've been getting by without holding any grudges against Sharon or Margaret, thinking that way. When Edward first started preschool, Margaret would only stay for 2 to 3 hours. But now, 2 years later, she is almost here from morning till night. That's not all. Recently, she even stays all day on weekends. Isn't her husband Kevin saying anything about her spending so much time here? Concerned, I subtly asked her, "Margaret, I'm glad you visit and keep Sharon company often, but is Kevin okay with it?" Trying to be considerate, I thanked her for keeping Sharon company while I'm away at work all day. I thought I was being thoughtful, but Margaret still gave me a suspicious look. Maybe she didn't want to be asked about her family affairs. Ignoring my consideration, she responded sarcastically, "What, are you saying I shouldn't be here? I think Mom feels lonely without any kids in the house, so I'm being thoughtful by bringing her grandson here." That's right, Ashley. If we had a grandchild in this house, Margaret wouldn't have to be so considerate. Don't ask such mean questions. Even Sharon jumped in with sarcastic comments, siding with Margaret. Sharon never made such remarks when Margaret wasn't around. Does having a daughter make a mother bolder? There's no way I could win against them 2-on-1. John is always late with work, and without anyone to support me, I had to endure silently. Well, John working hard with overtime is for our goal, so it can't be helped. Still, a child. I've been so focused on saving money that I never considered having kids. But now I'm 35. I think it's time to have at least one child. If we keep working as full-time employees, we might miss the chance to have a child due to our busy schedules. Thinking that, I consulted John. Hey, we've been working hard to build a house together, but I really want a child. So, I think I want to quit my job and focus on preconception care. John listened seriously. Yeah, we're not getting any younger. If we want kids, it has to be now. I'll take care of the finances so you can focus on preconception care. Thank you. I'll do my best to have a child. But I'll continue my blog as a remote job. Even after getting married, I continued my blog in the spare moments between work and household chores. By keeping up with this, I wouldn't have to worry about putting all the financial burden on John if I quit my job to focus on getting pregnant. So, I started my days with cleaning and laundry, then spent my days working remotely. However, one day, after I had been out of the office for a while, John came home looking very serious. Welcome home. What's wrong? You look pale. I'm sorry, Ashley. From next month, I'll be working overseas for a year. I asked the company for a raise, but they transferred me to an overseas branch instead. I couldn't hide my surprise at the sudden news. What? Then I'll go with you. I quit my job to focus on preconception care. But John quietly shook his head. Sorry, but I'll go alone. It's a tough place to live for a family. I'll be back in a year, so can you wait here until then? His eyes were serious. So, I decided to stay at my in-laws' house. Okay. I know it will be tough for you too, so don't overdo it. Thanks. Ashley, if anything happens with Mom or Margaret, let me know immediately. Don't keep it to yourself. John seemed to understand. Sharon and Margaret were being mean to me. Still, I was determined to get along with my in-laws until John returned. But the next day, Sharon and Margaret yelled at me as soon as they saw my face. Ashley! How dare you not go with John for his overseas assignment? That's right. You quit your job, so there's no reason for you to stay in America. This isn't your house, you're just a parasite. Without John, you have no right to be here. Sharon's attitude was one thing, but Margaret, despite being married, acted like this was her house. She probably thought that without me, she could hang around even more freely. Even though she already spends a lot of time here. I decided I couldn't just let them talk to me like that. This was decided after talking with John. It's not just my decision. So, I'll be here taking care of things until he returns. I expected them to say something back immediately, but surprisingly, they left the room without a word. However, they had a nasty, sly smile on their faces. I couldn't help but feel a chill down my spine, thinking they might be planning something. After John left for his assignment, my fears came true, and the harassment from Sharon and Margaret escalated. Sharon started telling the neighbors that I didn't go overseas because we were separated, not because John was on assignment. Margaret, on the other hand, cried to the neighbors, saying she couldn't live with her parents because I was staying at the in-laws' house. Because of this, the neighbors started giving me cold looks. What did I ever do to them? The harassment was so severe that I couldn't bring myself to tell John. If I did, it would only make him worry more. For now, I decided to focus on my remote work. That would help distract me a bit. But recently, even while working on my laptop in my room, Sharon often called me out. Are you wasting time on another silly side job? You said you'd take care of the house while John is away. So, do more chores. What? I finished the laundry and cleaning already. I was shocked by her harsh words. She used to be tough only when Margaret was around, but now she's constantly bossing me around. Laundry and cleaning aren't the only chores. You're not working at a company anymore, so you're a housewife. Do all the housework. Sharon was clearly taking advantage of John's absence to be mean to me. Still, I gritted my teeth and endured. Maybe my attitude annoyed her. Recently, when Margaret comes over, I hear them whispering. They must be plotting something. But I'll endure it. However, one night, something terrible happened. She was staying late with Edward again. Then, even though it was already late, there was a commotion in the living room. Sharon and Margaret seemed to be looking for something. "It's not here! It's gone!" they yelled, so I went to see what was happening. "What's wrong?" When I asked from the doorway, Sharon and Margaret glared at me. "What's wrong?" "My precious handbag is missing. The one Margaret bought me from overseas last year, a high-end brand bag." "What?" "I don't know anything about it." "I'll help you look." I couldn't concentrate on my remote work with this commotion. And Edward was still awake, sitting quietly in the corner. We needed to find it quickly so he could go to bed, so I decided to help. But then Margaret said sarcastically, "Oh, how convenient. I bet you hid it. Now you're pretending to look for it." "What?" She was trying to frame me. What basis did she have to say that? "I didn't hide it." "Don't say such things without any proof." "Oh? Is that so? Don't you think I have proof? Maybe you did it out of spite for the harassment I received. Besides, we searched the whole house and didn't find it. Something's definitely off." Sharon was also completely suspicious of me. At that moment, Margaret began to look around. "Come to think of it, Mom. The only place we haven't checked in the house is Ashley's room, right? I'll go take a look." "What?" Margaret walked into my room. There was nothing in there that would embarrass me, but still, this was too much, even for family. Within 10 seconds, Margaret emerged from the room, holding the handbag. "Mom! I found it. It was in the closet. See, Ashley was hiding it." "No way." I looked at Sharon and said, "That's not true. I didn't hide it." "Don't try to make excuses. You look so innocent, but you're really sly, aren't you?" Sharon smirked maliciously. Could this be an act to frame me? This harassment had gone too far, and I couldn't tolerate it anymore. Margaret, stepping out of my room, added, "Ashley, you quit your job to try for a baby, then John left for overseas, and now you're just doing some petty remote work, right? You must be short on money and planned to sell this bag on a resale app, didn't you?" Her snide remark made me respond firmly. "I absolutely did not do that. If you want to accuse me, go ahead." With that, I returned to my room. I paused my work and began to devise a plan. Originally, I intended to discuss it thoroughly with John when he returned, but I couldn't leave things as they were. And so, a year passed. Since then, the harassment from Sharon and Margaret had continued, but I stayed mostly in my room, focusing on my remote work. The plan I had been working on was progressing smoothly. One day, Sharon, apparently fed up with me still living there, finally spoke up. "When are you going to apologize for stealing my handbag? You're holed up in your room all day, claiming to work remotely. It's suffocating having you here. Just leave. A thief like you should move out immediately." "That's right, Mom. How can you feel at ease with a thief in the house?" Margaret, who was lounging around our house again, chimed in. But I wasn't afraid of anything they said anymore. So, I retorted, "Yes. I've already made arrangements to move out. I'm packing my things now." "What?" Sharon and Margaret were surprised by my unexpected response. The truth is, the plan was about purchasing a custom-built home. After researching the timeline, I found it would take about a year. I had been making arrangements with John in secret while keeping it hidden from Sharon and Margaret. Today, the new house was finally completed. With John returning from his assignment soon, I had already completed the moving procedures ahead of time. Unaware of this, Sharon and Margaret were initially shocked, but soon started laughing as if they had thought of something. "Ha ha ha ha. There you go again, acting tough. You don't even have a home to go to, so where do you plan to move?" "Well, I'll let you know once I've settled into my new place. So, please handle the upcoming bills." "What? What bills?" Sharon asked, but I ignored her and left the house. The next day, while I was checking the items delivered to the new house, my smartphone suddenly rang. I couldn't answer immediately as I was dealing with the moving company, but the phone kept ringing persistently. I had a pretty good idea of who it was, so I checked the call log. As expected, it was Sharon. Knowing I couldn't ignore it any longer, I decided to answer the call. As soon as I did, she started yelling furiously. "Hey, weren't you supposed to pay for the utilities with the money John sends? Why did I receive unpaid bills? And it's $500 for electricity, gas, and water combined." "Yes, I used to handle that, but since we're moving, we stopped the automatic payments for those accounts. So from now on, Sharon, you'll need to pay them yourself." "But isn't $500 way too much?" That was inevitable. Sharon and Margaret would leave the TV on late into the night, crank up the AC while chatting, and often leave the water running. The bills for every 2 months were close to $200 just for water. While I was handling the payments, I chose a bundled plan for electricity and gas with the internet to save money, but I canceled all of that 2 months ago. However, the bills that arrived weren't just for utilities. Since I moved into the in-laws' house, Sharon and Margaret had joined an upscale fitness club that wealthy people frequent. During the membership registration, they asked me to accompany them and even had the fees deducted from my account. Moreover, since I had already canceled that account, I received the bill for last month's fees and the annual fee that was due this month. The utility bills and the fitness fees for both of us total about $3,000. I can't possibly pay that. "Ashley, please ask John to cover it." In hindsight, moving in with my in-laws to save on rent might have been a mistake. While utility bills were one thing, I thought paying for Sharon's hobbies was a kind gesture for accommodating us. Now, I regret not avoiding the cohabitation from the start. But I wasn't going to be lenient with Sharon anymore, so I firmly replied, "No. From now on, you need to handle all your utility and hobby expenses yourself. I thought I made that clear last time." "What? Are you still my son's wife? Oh, I see. You don't have any money because you have to pay rent now, right? Well, you quit your job and now just make pocket money from remote work." Sharon, who had been pleading for money, switched to looking down on me as soon as I refused her request. However, I remained calm and responded, "No, we bought the house and paid for it in full. So, we don't have any financial troubles." Sharon seemed to be at a loss for words. I could hear a faint, "That can't be true." But I ended the call, feeling the conversation was over. A few days later, Sharon and Margaret showed up at my new house out of nowhere. "Oh, finally found you. We've been looking for you, Ashley. And you live in such a big house. Sharon looked around the house in amazement from the front door. Sharon, how did you find out about this place? Apparently, Sharon had hired a private investigator to find me. Despite having no money, why would she go to such lengths? When I asked, Margaret gave an unexpected answer. Ashley. You're that famous homemaker blogger Armic, aren't you? I came across it online. The blog that introduces budget-saving goods, and it's rumored you're making quite a bit of money. So, that's how you could build such a big house without a loan, right? By the way, how much is your annual income? It's true that I've been making money from the blog I've maintained for years. Although it varies from month to month, my average annual income has been around $100,000 for the past few years. John also worked hard with overtime and his overseas assignment, and together, we saved enough to build our custom-built home. But I wasn't about to tell Sharon, who came here with ulterior motives. As I remained silent, they insisted even more. Anyway, it's clear you're making a lot. You built such a big house so easily, right, Mom? From now on, we'll live here together, won't we? Of course. It's my son's house. It's a waste for just the two of them to live in such a big place. Right, Ashley? Their forceful attitude left me speechless. I stood there with a pale face, and then, Mom, that's not happening. John, who had already returned from his overseas assignment, emerged from the back of the house. He glared at Sharon with sharp eyes and said loudly, Mom, I've known for a long time. I knew you and Margaret were being mean to Ashley. So, there's no way we'll live together again. What? We weren't being mean. Where's the proof? Sharon tried to deny it. Proof? I called someone who can testify to that. They should be arriving soon. Sharon and Margaret looked nervous, wondering who he had called. Just then, a car pulled up in front of the house. Out came Edward and his father. Margaret's husband, Kevin. Kevin? What are you doing here? Kevin and John had been friends since their student days. John had called Kevin after hearing Margaret's harsh words towards me from the back of the house. Kevin looked sternly at Margaret and asked, Margaret, have you signed the divorce papers I gave you? Margaret was speechless and hung her head. Seeing her daughter like this, Sharon anxiously asked Kevin, Why are you getting a divorce? Did she do something wrong? You know the answer to that, Sharon. Since Edward was born, she's been staying at your house all the time and hardly ever comes home. The only thing she does is pick up Edward from preschool. I can't stay married to someone who doesn't do any housework. His words made Sharon's face turn red. And rightfully so. She had kept her daughter at her house, making her stay for long periods. As a parent, she must have felt ashamed. Edward has often told me, Mom and Grandma are mean to Ashley. It's one thing not to come home, but to be cruel to my brother's wife. I can't stay silent. Hearing this, Edward remembered something and spoke up. That's right. The worst part was when Ashley was cooking in the kitchen and Mom hid Grandma's bag in Ashley's room. Then Mom lied and said Ashley stole it and yelled at her. That incident. So, it was a prank set up by the two of them. Sharon and Margaret framed me for theft, treating me like a criminal. Even thinking about it now makes me furious. It seems Edward was the witness John mentioned. Edward, now a grade schooler, had grown into a reliable young boy. He couldn't speak up back then, but now he was ready to testify. However, Margaret shockingly smacked Edward on the head and whispered in his ear, Hey! We agreed you'd never tell anyone about that. In a panic, she tried to cover it up, but it was too late. Kevin's sharp gaze pierced through her. Margaret, what kind of person are you? Telling such things to our son. And worse, doing that to Ashley. I'm not just divorcing you. I want you to stay away from Edward too. Absolutely. Margaret, unable to respond, looked completely deflated, her face contorted in fear. Feeling pity, Sharon gently hugged Margaret and stroked her head. John, witnessing this, spoke firmly. Mom, it's because you've been spoiling Margaret that she's become so selfish. You two have caused enough trouble for Ashley, and now you want to live with us to mooch off us? I'm cutting ties with you. Leave now. Sharon turned pale and started sweating, frightened by John's outburst. But Margaret stepped in to help. Mom, don't worry about what John says. Legally, a child can't cut ties with their parent. Is that true? Thank goodness. I almost fell for John's threat. It must have been Ashley's idea, but it was foolish. They sneered at me, thinking they had the upper hand. Bringing up legalities meant they would keep showing up and demanding support. And if Margaret got divorced, she'd certainly come back and latch onto us. Unsure what to do, I looked at John. John gave me a reassuring look and then turned back to Sharon with a smirk. Who's being foolish? Mom, you're still healthy, so I don't need to take care of you. If you keep ignoring our refusal and try to move in, we'll file a restraining order. A restraining order? What are you talking about? John's idea was to file a restraining order if my in-laws insisted on moving in despite our repeated refusals. If Sharon violated it, she would have to pay us a penalty. John, always the smart one, knew all the details. Hearing this, Sharon had no choice but to back down. Margaret, panicking at the thought of being kicked out and not having Sharon to rely on, pleaded. Mom, I thought you'd live with John and Ashley in this big house. If we can't live here, what will I do? She turned to Kevin with a suddenly sweet voice that made me sick. Kevin, I'll apologize to Ashley and start doing housework, so can we forget about everything? Her voice was so syrupy sweet that it made me nauseous. Even if she apologized now, there was no way I'd forgive her. Kevin, with a disgusted look, replied, It's too late. Just sign the divorce papers. I don't want to see your face again. That's right. Mom, you're gross. I don't want to see you anymore either. Even you, Edward? Being rejected by her own son made her even more dejected. Fine. I'll go home and sign the divorce papers. Is that what you want? Crying, she finally gave in. At last, the matter was resolved. Sharon went home, and Margaret went back with Kevin to finalize the divorce papers before returning to her family home. Finally, John and I could enjoy our new home in peace. Ashley, I'm sorry for all the trouble. No, it's okay. Let's just be happy together from now on. We smiled at each other, feeling relieved. Later, Margaret submitted the divorce papers and moved back to her family home. Kevin visited us to apologize for all the trouble Margaret caused. I'm really sorry for all the trouble Margaret caused you, Ashley. I felt humbled by Kevin's sincere apology. No, it's okay. You must have had a hard time with Margaret always being away. No, Margaret never did any housework, so it wasn't inconvenient. But did you hear about what Margaret's been up to recently? Kevin chuckled as he spoke. Curious about what had happened, I asked him. What's going on? Why do you have that grin on your face? Did something weird happen to Margaret? Kevin's story made me laugh out loud. It turns out that both Sharon and Margaret, who are now living in my in-laws' house, are unemployed and struggling to pay their utility bills and other expenses. Desperate, Sharon asked Margaret to do something outrageous. She told Margaret to make money from blogging like I do. Margaret thought if I could do it, she could too. But making a good income from blogging isn't that easy. Even I have spent 12 years since my single days, working hard and learning from my failures. So, someone starting without any knowledge couldn't suddenly make money. As expected, Margaret's hasty attempt to make money backfired, and her blog was bombarded with negative comments and became quite the scandal. It seems her blog was full of baseless personal opinions and exaggerated claims about products. Had she sincerely apologized for the critical comments, it might have been different, but Margaret's pride wouldn't allow it. She quickly deleted the blog and hasn't done anything since. According to him, she was so shocked by the criticism that she became bedridden and has been a recluse ever since. Now, Sharon has to support her unemployed daughter. You'd think she'd just let her go, but Sharon feels guilty for spoiling and raising her to be so selfish. Since she has never worked before, she didn't know what to do and started doing temporary day labor jobs. Lately, Sharon and Margaret often get into loud arguments that last through the night, disturbing the neighbors. From the time they spread nasty rumors about me, the neighbors had realized I wasn't at fault and started giving them the cold shoulder. As a result, they are now ignored by everyone. They are struggling with life, and no one is there to help them. Well, it's their own responsibility. If Sharon ever needs care when she gets older, my husband and I will have to take care of her. But as long as she's healthy, we don't need to worry about that. Meanwhile, John and I are happily living in our new home. We've cut ties with Margaret, but Edward is John's nephew, and Kevin is a close friend. So, Kevin and Edward often come to visit, and we enjoy meals and good times together. And there's one more thing to be happy about. I am finally pregnant with our long-awaited child. The thought of our growing family fills me with excitement. Edward is thrilled, saying, "I'm going to be a big brother." Kevin says, "I'm done with marriage." So Edward and our child might end up like real siblings. We've faced many hardships, but we've built our dream custom-built home, and now we can focus on creating a happy family. I vow to live joyfully with John, our baby, and our good friends Kevin and Edward. Since Greg passed away, you'll be moving back with your parents, right? We'll be taking over this house. My beloved husband, Greg, had suddenly passed away. Right after the funeral, as I was grieving, Greg's parents, Reynold and Melissa, came to visit me. Although not many, this house is filled with memories of living with him. Why do I have to be the one to leave? However, to me, who was in no state to handle this, my MIL Melissa ruthlessly declared those words. My name is Kathleen. I work as a clerk at a real estate agency. My encounter with Greg, who would become my precious husband, was through the real estate agency where I work. He was the real brother of my colleague, Bro, and the two were extremely close. Since their workplaces were nearby, Bro often stopped by. As I also worked as a clerk, I became close with my colleague who would later become my husband. That's how I was introduced to his real brother. Eventually, I started spending more time with the brothers, such as going out for lunch together when they invited me. I thought he was a nice guy who was easy to talk to and had a bright personality, but I didn't really think of him as a potential romantic partner. I assumed he felt the same way, but then one day, something happened that triggered a change in our relationship. Bro had made a reservation at a restaurant for us to meet up, but he suddenly had an urgent matter and couldn't make it. However, it seemed like a waste to cancel the reservation. So, for the first time, Greg and I had the opportunity to be alone together. I found out later that the Bro brothers had planned this together, and David had arranged for us to be alone at Bro's request. The food was delicious, and our conversation flowed easily. We quickly became intimate, sharing our upbringings and values. The more I got to know his inner self, the more I was drawn to his warm smile. From that day on, our relationship changed. And it didn't take long for us to get married. It probably wouldn't have happened without David's thoughtfulness. In that sense, I couldn't be more grateful to him for the events that were about to unfold. And then the day came to meet my PIL. Despite my anxiety, they welcomed me very warmly. The conversation continued with compassion, and my nervousness melted away.
We're so happy you're here. We've been looking forward to meeting you, Kathleen. I've cooked up a storm hoping today would be a wonderful day,
Melissa said, fussing over me. My PIL, like their eldest son Greg, were very independent and approachable people. I was relieved and filled with gratitude for the enjoyable time I had spent at my in-laws' home. Even after several interactions, my in-laws continued to support our happiness while maintaining a comfortable distance, never pressuring us about marriage or children. Eventually, the topic of living together with my in-laws came up, but we had plans to build our own home. Actually, my grandfather left me a house, I explained, and my in-laws listened intently and nodded. To my grandfather, I was his only granddaughter, and he doted on me immensely. He even left me a magnificent house with land, perfectly renovated down to the interior. It was as if my grandfather had waited for the inheritance process to be completed before passing away. The land was set to undergo redevelopment soon, and due to its prime location, the property value had skyrocketed. However, with my long experience in the real estate industry, I understood that boldly selling the property would be more beneficial for our dream home plans than living there ourselves. I was grateful for my grandfather's love, but he had told us that we could either live in or sell the inherited house, so we were already considering selling it. After getting married, we moved into that house. However, even with its excellent location, it was difficult to continue living there due to the distance from our workplaces. As we were moving forward with the plan to sell the house, one day, a significant change came to our lives. Craig, who worked in sales, was ordered to transfer. His company was a large corporation with branches all across the United States. Even though we were newlyweds, he was told that he was the only suitable candidate, and since it was an official order, he couldn't refuse. I'll make sure to come back every holiday. Also, my parents said they'll come visit. I don't want you to overdo it, but could you take them out and show them around? Reynold and Melissa are really nice people, so going out with them won't be a problem. But it looks like it'll be a while before we can let go of the house. Considering my job as well, it was decided that he would go on a solo assignment. It was sudden, but I had to suppress my loneliness and worries and wait for the day we could live together again. Just as Greg had said, during the holidays, my in-laws, especially Melissa, frequently came to visit. She shared that she too had endured loneliness many times in the past when Reynold had to go on business trips, while she took care of their young children.
Even without children, you can nurture family memories. Let's go out together. Going shopping will lift your spirits. Come on, Kathleen.
Thanks to her, I didn't feel lonely and instead had busy holidays. However, little by little, things started to bother me. On my days off from work, Melissa would almost always invite me to go out. That was fine, but after a month, her invitations became somewhat forceful, and she seemed to disregard my fatigue and housework. If I said, "I want to rest this week," she would furrow her brows as if I were being selfish.
But going out together is fun, isn't it? Or are you saying you don't like going out with me?
That's not it. But since you take me out every week, Don't you need some rest too? Melissa looked sad. Even when I hurriedly tried to clear up the misunderstanding, she wouldn't listen at all. Although I was perplexed, when I agreed, she showed a smile and acted as if she had forgotten how she had persistently pressured me. My doubts about her words and actions gradually grew stronger. The places she forcibly invited me to were all shops where high expenses piled up. Shopping at brand stores and expensive meals continued, and she manipulated the situation so that I would bear the costs. She would often leave the store first, leaving me behind with no choice but to pay. There was never any gratitude for the payments, nor did she ever pay me back later. Certainly, I had savings since I owned a home and received a sufficient salary. However, my husband and I had always been mindful of restraint, so I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with Melissa's extravagant behavior. Sometimes both of my in-laws would be there, but it was the same in those cases too. Rather, with my FIL Reynolds joining in, my burden only became heavier. I knew I needed to resolve this, but I couldn't bring myself to talk to Greg about it. He had said, "I'll definitely come back during the holidays." But the sales office where he was assigned was quite busy, and he couldn't come back easily. "Mom told me you've been going out every week. Are you managing okay? You don't seem worried?" That's right. When I saw Greg's face on our video call, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes and his slightly sunken cheeks. I could tell he was still tired from work. Feeling guilty about bringing up the issue with Melissa, I found myself putting on a brave face.
Melissa has been really good to me. Greg, please take care of yourself too. I'm fine. So, don't worry.
While making excuses to Greg, I couldn't refuse to pay for the outings with my in-laws. However, their attitude gradually escalated, and finally, when I insisted, "I can't go out today," they said something like this. Then, "Hey, can't you lend me some money?"
What? You want me to pay?
"Just a little bit, really just a small amount. I already made a reservation at the restaurant. I'll take some other friends instead, so can you cover the amount I don't have on me?" I wanted to refuse, but if I did, the situation would become complicated and unmanageable. Resigned to the fact that I had no choice but to pay, I opened my wallet. However, I never showed this kind of attitude in front of Greg. When I subtly probed Melissa, saying, "Why don't you try asking Greg?" I was surprised when she replied,
"Asking him would be shameful."
She thought it was embarrassing to ask her eldest son, so she figured she could just ask his wife instead. I had long given up on her, and it had become a daily occurrence for her to demand money from me. At the very least, if I gave her money under the guise of an allowance, Melissa would stop forcibly dragging me out. I knew it had developed into a big problem. However, I was exhausted from the inability to have a proper dialogue with her. Her behavior became increasingly incomprehensible and bizarre. Just when I thought she had suddenly shown up without prior notice, she would look around the inside and outside of the house as if licking it, making me feel like my home's privacy was being violated. "I wonder if these furnishings are what Kathleen's grandpa left behind. It's amazing that you have the means to have such high-end items." Some of the furniture included antiques that my grandfather had been fond of. She seemed to like them, barging in to admire them and enjoying them as if they were her own. This is my and Greg's home. I finally started considering confiding in Greg about Melissa's words and actions. Greg might be surprised, but how great would it be if we could think together about how to deal with her? Her behavior was never pleasant. No matter how much of an in-law relationship we had, it was an act of invading privacy. However, at the same time, the duration of Greg's solo assignment was determined. If I could just endure a little longer, he would come back, and if Greg were here, my in-laws would stop demanding money too. A little hope sprouted in my heart. Greg was working hard every day, so my patience would only be a little longer. That's how I was eagerly awaiting my reunion with Greg, but the situation took an unexpected turn.
What? Greg collapsed and is in the hospital?
My mind went blank. The person who contacted me was a colleague from his assignment location, and I hurriedly headed to the hospital. Perhaps due to the heavy workload, he had suddenly suffered a heart attack. He was transported by ambulance, but it was too late. Kind Greg, whose strong point was his health, passed away in an instant from an attack that no one could have anticipated. I faced the funeral without even being able to accept reality. I don't remember much due to the strong sense of loss. David rushed over and took care of most of the miscellaneous matters for me. I'm sorry. You just lost bro too, and you're helping me so much.
It's only natural for me to help with bro's funeral. More importantly, is everything okay with the land? Are the preparations for the house complete?
Around the end of the funeral, David and I talked extensively while cleaning up. I nodded to that and answered,
Perfect.
And a few days after Greg's funeral, my PAL came to visit the house together. However, it was glaringly obvious that they hadn't come to console me.
Although it was sudden and unfortunate about our son, you'll be fine because we're here.
Don't worry. For some reason, her face was smiling in an eerie way. Even more astonishingly, she had arranged for a truck, and it was packed full of luggage like furniture from my in-laws' home. I was so surprised and confused that I couldn't even speak. No matter how you looked at it, this was a move-in. Melissa and the others were trying to move in without any consultation. What was making them do this? But the answer was clear.
Could it be that you're after our land?
I put into words the concern that had been in my heart all along, even as I was confused. She showed a cold smile.
The property value has skyrocketed quite a bit. I've had my eye on this house for a long time. I mean, the only reason you were able to marry my son was because of this inheritance, right? I allowed the marriage because you were the one who inherited it.
Filled with despair, I lost my words.
You mean you and Melissa are going to live with me? What? What kind of stupid thing are you saying?
When I asked that while still confused, she raised her eyebrows. Greg's death was an unexpected event, but actually, even if it hadn't been, Melissa had planned to get her hands on this house. My in-laws were trying to kick me out and take over this property. And they seemed to have assumed on their own that I would leave this house.
Since our son died too, you'll be going back to your parents' place, right? This house will be sad if it's empty, so we'll live in it for you. That's why I'm telling you not to worry.
Her face changed into a distorted, eerie smile. Even as I felt fear, I pointed out her mistake.
But this house has already been sold.
I held back from laughing at Melissa's misunderstanding, but I couldn't hide my half-smiling expression. In contrast, Melissa froze, saying,
What?
Just then, a moving company truck from a completely different company arrived.
Excuse me, I'm here for a delivery to your home.
Perhaps because a truck from a competing company was parked there, a burly mover got out and called out to us to confirm. The movers she had arranged also got out. They probably realized something was off since they couldn't start working and a different truck had arrived. They sought an explanation from my in-laws, but the two of them were flustered and incoherent. There was no point in all of us arguing like this. Seeing my flustered in-laws, I finally began to regain my composure. After that, I gave precise instructions to have the trucks moved. This house already has a buyer, and the contract has been finalized. A new family is moving in, so we can't bring these people's belongings into someone else's home, right? As the movers were also shocked, a luxury car arrived just then. A wealthy-looking couple and their children got out. In fact, this property was no longer mine. They were the new owners. My in-laws became even more confused, seemingly unable to understand what was happening.
Please move the trucks quickly. The new residents can't start their work.
Somehow, I managed to get the trucks on Melissa's side to leave, and the movers immediately got to work, carrying brand new furniture in the planned order. Melissa and the others couldn't accept it and started persistently pestering me at the front door. The husband, who was the buyer, had his family take refuge in the car and rushed over here, demanding an explanation, starting yet another commotion.
Who are you people? My family bought this place. Have the trucks leave quickly too.
I never thought my in-laws would come, so I apologized profusely and somehow got them to calm down. But Melissa and the others wouldn't leave. They actually pushed past us and charged into the house. However, naturally, the inside of the house had also completely changed from what the two of them knew. None of the furniture my husband and I had used remained. Melissa was shocked by the sight and started making a scene, going crazy.
What is this? The house is empty. That antique furniture and lighting, they were my favorites. What's going on?
She was outraged, unable to understand what was happening. When the residents finally shouted,
"We're calling the police!"
Reynolds, who had been in a panic, ran as if jolted and dragged Melissa away to retreat. Once they were a little away from the scene, even the heated-up Melissa became somewhat dazed and quiet. For the time being, I prioritized apologizing to the residents. They said there was no guarantee that problems wouldn't arise in the future, and by taking down my in-laws' names and addresses, I was somehow released. Although I was feeling intense fatigue, I still had to explain to my in-laws. I returned to the two of them and calmly informed them that the move had been completed a few days before Greg's passing.
This house was originally planned to be sold along with the land, so it's according to the initial plan.
Greg's solo assignment had put a stop to it once, but there was a certain background to why things could progress so smoothly. The one who supported our decision was David. I was perplexed by the change in my in-laws, who had even started asking for money, but I couldn't confide in Greg because I didn't want him to worry, so I continued to spend my days feeling down. David was the one who noticed and saved me. He said he didn't get along well with my in-laws' home and offered to help if I had any troubles. Not wanting to ruin my relationship with my husband or my in-laws, I trusted David, who promised not to tell anyone, and decided to consult him about everything. Upon hearing my story, he became furious with my in-laws. As Greg's younger brother and my colleague, he understood my in-laws' schemes well. And for David, his bro Greg was his only family. He said that I, as Greg's wife, was like family too.
I think our parents will eventually try to live together in that house or conveniently kick you two out and make it their own.
According to David, both of my in-laws had high-class thinking to the point of being ignorant of the world. They were pretentious and didn't hesitate to use any means necessary. Especially Melissa, who was terribly selfish. While she pretended to be a lovely lady when she was keeping up appearances, she was actually a nasty person who only thought about her own convenience. Because they were blood-related family, the episodes about my in-laws that David shared were all intense. Since they put on a front in front of their eldest son, who was the successor, Greg probably never had to see this side of his parents. Anyway, when it was suggested that I should sell the land early to avoid having it taken by my in-laws, I agreed with David's opinion and decided to proceed with the sale. No matter how precious it was, having been left by my dear grandfather, I wanted to avoid this house becoming an obstacle for my husband and me. Rather, it was because it was precious that I didn't want to leave any roots of trouble. Of course, I didn't decide on my own. I discussed it with Greg while he was still alive and got his consent. At that time, he learned about all of his parents' actions. I really didn't want to tell him, but I couldn't complete the sale all by myself. However, he properly understood my feelings of not being able to consult him, and on top of that, he declared that he couldn't forgive his parents' actions. I'm sorry I didn't notice. If it's okay with you, Kathleen, let's complete the sale before my parents make a move. I'm sorry, even though it's the precious house you inherited from Grandpa. No, he would agree that we should let it go if it's going to cause trouble. I decided to sell the land to protect my future with Greg, not my relationship with my in-laws. Regarding the sale, David, who was a real estate expert, did his best to find the most suitable buyer. What I had to do was find a new place to move to as soon as possible and act naturally so my in-laws wouldn't notice. Since we had been living in the house, it had some signs of use but was as good as new, and we kept the price down accordingly. Then, we were able to find a buyer right away, and the sale went smoothly. That was the family that arrived earlier. I had actually planned to wait for his return in our new home that we moved to. Greg was also happy about the sale, so that's the only thing I regret. The movers start bringing in the furniture. Disregarding my expelled in-laws, the moving work steadily progressed. My in-laws didn't make a fuss and just watched in a daze, but they couldn't stay like that forever. The moving company that my in-laws had hired came demanding an explanation, looking angry. From the company's perspective, there was an incomprehensible deficiency causing a booking issue with the move. They pressed my in-laws, saying, "I can't believe something like this happened. And this is a breach of contract." But my in-laws were vague and couldn't explain well. In the end, it was decided that the household goods would be taken back for the time being, but due to the unexpected situation, it seemed that a substantial surcharge would be billed. Perhaps finally understanding the series of events, Melissa clung to me, trembling. "Since this is the house of my son's wife, it's our house. Right? This is strange, isn't it?" She lined up desperate excuses, trying to somehow persuade me, but I ignored them and left with just my carry-on luggage. The land already belonged to the new family and wasn't even mine anymore, so there was nothing I needed to answer for. Things went smoothly even after Greg's funeral. I did come face to face with my in-laws, and they seemed to want to say something to me about the house, but in the end, they couldn't say it and hid before leaving. I no longer had any obligation to fulfill toward my in-laws either, so since I had no business with them, I hardly spoke to them at all. I spent my days peacefully without incident. In the new house. In the small house where my husband and I were supposed to restart, I faced the sadness of losing Greg. I had a large amount of savings from the sale, but now that Greg was gone, the plan to build our own home had vanished. As I returned to work, I immersed myself in the few memories I had with Greg and took a fresh look at myself to gradually become more positive. On the other hand, my in-laws, especially Melissa, must have had a frustrating sense of dissatisfaction building up. I didn't want to be involved with them anymore, so I didn't even let them know the location of my new residence. Unable to interact with me, that seemed to further increase Melissa's dissatisfaction. She had been putting on airs for her eldest son, and she couldn't go to David, with whom she had a bad relationship, at this point. However, the stress of not knowing my whereabouts kept piling up, and eventually, Melissa lost her balance. One late night, she committed the vicious act of spilling gasoline around the sold house. Fortunately, a passing neighbor found it suspicious and immediately restrained her, avoiding any incidents. When the police were notified, it was discovered that she had also prepared old papers and lighters, and she was arrested on suspicion of attempted arson. The husband, who had almost been set on fire, became furious when he realized the culprit was the woman who had barged in on moving day, and he contacted me too, saying he would definitely press charges. I apologized many times, but that was an apology for the terrifying experience of almost being set on fire, and there was nothing I could do about her attempted arson. In the end, Melissa, who was fixated on the house, couldn't avoid being charged. I also apologized repeatedly and somehow gained forgiveness, promising that such a thing would never happen again. She had grown up spoiled, not knowing poverty, and she could get anything she wanted. That's probably why she felt irritated when things didn't go her way, wanting that house, and a distorted jealousy sprouted within her. She grew to resent the house and land, turned to crime, and in the end, she ended up in prison. Reynolds, who was supposed to be her support, had endless fights with Melissa after her arrest, abandoned her, and forcibly finalized their divorce. So even after serving her sentence, her home to return to was completely lost. However, that could be said to be the result of the actions she chose. David was lonely after losing his bro, but he encouraged me, saying,
"I can endure it because I have my Sael."
My ties with my in-laws were safely cut, but I hadn't lost all my family. I decided in my heart to spend my days peacefully, for the sake of Greg, who was watching over me from heaven.
"I'm pregnant, so give me $3,000.
Laughing mockingly, Sierra extended her hand. I instinctively brushed it away.
"There's no way I'm giving you that. And why does it have to be such a high amount?"
To my question, Sierra sneered. Cute kids cost money. You wouldn't understand.
That kid's surely going to be cute like Sierra. Unlike someone, she's probably going to be a beauty.
Sierra and Rodney burst into laughter. I felt like my anger was about to explode. I just couldn't bear it anymore. Unintentionally, the words I'd been holding back slipped out.
Actually, about that kid."
As soon as they heard my words, Sierra turned pale, and Rodney looked shocked. Things went a bit differently than planned, but you could say it's a smooth start. But the real revenge starts now. They'll have to pay for what they did to Sis. Let them cry all night after losing everything. Well, that still wouldn't be enough for me. They might as well enjoy themselves for now. Because those smiles will soon fade away. Smiling to myself, I distanced myself from the quarreling Sierra and Rodney. My name is Hannah. I'm 33 and I work in a design office. Talking like this might give off a stylish, urban impression. But the reason I chose this path isn't so simple. To be honest, this was the only choice I had. That's the right way to put it. Actually, I have an older sister named Daisy. Daisy is 2 years older than me and could do anything. Compared to Daisy, who excels in both studies and sports, all I could do was draw. Illustration was the only thing I didn't lose against Sis. That was my only solace. But, don't get me wrong, it's not like I had a bad relationship with Daisy or my parents. My parents loved me equally, and Daisy and I still keep in touch frequently. That's why, when Daisy got divorced 4 years ago, I couldn't hide my shock. Moreover, the reason was Rodney's affair, and the other woman was my best friend, Sierra. Sis. I'm sorry. I'll cut ties with Sierra. The day I declared that to Daisy still haunts my dreams. I'll never forgive Sierra. That's how I still feel inside. By the way, I met Sierra when we were in elementary school. We were the same age and became classmates for the first time in the upper grades. Of course, being in the same grade, we knew each other's names and faces. But we never really had any contact. And that's why we never talked before. I'm Sierra. Nice to meet you. Sierra had a very refined appearance. Her voice was cute, and every gesture was adorable. Being approached by such a cute classmate, I became nervous.
"What's wrong?"
Well, it's just that you're so much cuter than me."
"Me? Really?"
Sierra asked, looking back at me. I nodded slightly. In that moment, Sierra hugged me and whispered in my ear with a smile.
I think you're cute too. Be confident.
Really? Yeah. Let's become best friends. And that's how we became best friends. Since then, Sierra was always by my side. When I was talked about behind my back at school, it was Sierra who defended me first.
There are kids saying bad things about Hannah, but let's not do that.
Sierra said confidently in front of our classmates. As expected, the classmates fell silent. The reason I was talked about, in fact, was because of Daisy's presence being known. Initially, many friends would say things like this to me. It's so cool to have a sis who's good at studying. Being the starting player, that's awesome. I was happy when Daisy was praised. It didn't bother me. But those words of praise for Daisy turned into backhanded comments about me. Her sister is terrible at both studies and sports. Being good at drawing, isn't that kind of lame? Of course, no one would say it to my face. They talked in whispers, hidden in the corners of the classroom. But, of course, I could hear them. However, it was the truth, so I couldn't deny it. It was frustrating, but it was the truth. All I could do was bear it. But, maybe sensing how I felt, Sierra spoke up for me. Moreover, perhaps to prevent the issue from lingering, Sierra didn't single out the culprits. That approach worked well, and the people who talked about me disappeared.
Thank you, Sierra. We're best friends. Of course I got your back.
Our bond grew even stronger. However, I learned the truth about that incident a year ago. It was during a reunion after a long time. A friend told me this story. The bad-mouthing about me was instigated by Sierra. She defended me to gain my trust. Hearing that, I felt like my heart was about to burst with regret. If I had seen through the lie at that time, maybe sis wouldn't have divorced. Since learning that fact a year ago, I've found it even harder to forgive Sierra. Let me say this again, I only found out about this fact a year ago. So until the moment I heard about Daisy's divorce, I always thought of Sierra as my best friend. Even as we grew older, I believed Sierra was my best friend. That's why I accepted everything Sierra said without any doubt. You have a talent for illustration. You should definitely pursue that path.
Really? Do you think so? Go for it.
Sierra encouraged me. Thinking so, I enrolled in a design-focused university. Looking back, it might seem laughable. But back then, I believed Sierra's advice. However, there was one good thing. It was that I truly had a talent for illustration. After enrolling in university, my design talent blossomed, and I landed a job at a design office with top grades. On the other hand, Sierra joined a modeling agency after graduating high school. But she didn't make any spectacular achievements. She appeared in fashion magazines. But only a few times. That marked the end of Sierra's modeling career. Nonetheless, it's undeniable that Sierra was beautiful. As if leveraging her good looks, Sierra switched careers to a major apparel manufacturer. Then she started working as a salesperson at a clothing store the company operated. Being a former model, she indeed boosted the store's sales significantly. Thus, Sierra became a popular salesperson. Hearing the rumors, I visited Sierra. Sierra, you seem to have become quite popular.
Hannah! You came to see me!
Sierra rushed over. Being mindful of the surroundings, I nodded slightly. By the way, how's your job, Hannah? Web design and stuff, pretty challenging, but I guess it's fulfilling.
I see. Then I'll have to work hard too.
I thought she'd be down after quitting modeling, but she seemed just fine. As I was thinking, Sierra leaned in and asked, "So, what are you here to buy today? If it's a new collection, I can help out and choose for you."
No. It's not that. I'm actually looking for a present for sis.
2 years older, right? Is it her birthday or something? Sierra smiled. I replied a bit shyly.
Actually, sis, she's getting married.
Marriage? Congratulations!
Thank you, but I'm not the one getting married. Right. Sorry.
We laughed together. Then I talked about Daisy's marriage. Daisy, who had just turned 28 a few days ago, went out for a meal with her partner Rodney. There, Rodney proposed to Daisy. Of course, Daisy accepted. Having heard the story the day before, I decided to celebrate Daisy's marriage. And after much deliberation, I finally decided to gift Daisy clothes. Considering the upcoming wedding preparations and meetings, Daisy would have more occasions to go out. So, I was wondering if there's any nice outfit. I see. Let me choose for you. Do you have a photo or something of Daisy? Show me. Sierra extended her hand. I sent a photo of Daisy, stored on my mobile phone, to Sierra. It was a picture Daisy had sent me. It probably had been taken during a recent date. The impressive illumination in the background was a hot topic, and it was a photo I particularly liked. This illumination. It's really popular right now. Yup, exactly. We were talking about going there since everyone's buzzing about it. I stopped mid-sentence and instinctively clamped my mouth shut. But it seemed too late. Sierra was looking at me with a laugh. Then, putting her hand to her mouth, she asked me. I heard we were talking about going there. Do you have a boyfriend by any chance? Well. My ears turned red with embarrassment. Having a boyfriend was a first for me. Sierra, who had been with me since elementary school, knew that. Of course, Sierra seemed happy for me. But all of it was just an act. When Daisy got divorced and I confronted Sierra, she confessed. Moreover, the photo I sent at that time turned out to be the catalyst for Sierra and Rodney's affair. And on top of that, Sierra had already known for a few days that I had a boyfriend. Apparently, Sierra had witnessed me and my boyfriend Denny on a date a few days before. She was plotting to steal Denny from me. This too was a confession from Sierra. In short, if I hadn't brought up Daisy's marriage, Sierra would have tried to take my boyfriend away. Because I showed Rodney's photo to Sierra, sis ended up divorcing. It goes without saying how much I regretted it, even though it was done unknowingly. Nonetheless, oblivious to everything, I presented the clothes chosen by Sierra to Daisy. Daisy was really pleased and even prepared for her wedding wearing that outfit. Looking back now, I believe that was probably the happiest time for Daisy. After a while, Daisy got married, but she gradually became gloomier. Since we both lived alone, we used to contact each other frequently. However, shortly after the marriage, Daisy started to contact me less often. Maybe she's enjoying her married life? I thought lightly. Then, unusually, Daisy called me. Rodney might be having an affair. Daisy's voice was terribly somber. I tried to comfort her desperately. What do you mean? Are you sure it's not a misunderstanding? I don't think it's a misunderstanding. He's been coming home late, and he's not even home on his days off. Daisy said and finally broke down in tears. In my eyes, Daisy always seemed like a strong person. But that Daisy was crying now. It made it clear to me that she was not okay. Calm down, sis. Let's get to the bottom of this first. I proceeded with an investigation into Rodney's conduct. If they could reconcile, that would be best. That's what I thought, but it backfired. The investigation I initiated led Daisy to discover Rodney and Sierra's affair. Hearing that fact, Daisy and I confronted Sierra together. Sierra, what is this all about? What? There's nothing to it. Rodney and I are dating. That's all. But he's Sis's husband. Doesn't that make it an affair? I confronted Sierra with a strong tone. But Sierra seemed unfazed. An affair, sure, but what's the problem? He prefers a beautiful woman, obviously. Sierra glanced at Daisy. Daisy quickly looked down. Indeed, Sierra was more beautiful than Daisy and I. But if you consider what's inside, Sierra is overwhelmingly inferior. At any rate, Sierra, who could cheat without remorse, was much uglier than Daisy. The argument with Sierra escalated, but she remained defiant throughout. Realizing we were getting nowhere, I decided to confront Rodney next. Rodney, too, was just as defiant. Of course, I prefer beautiful women. When I'm seen with them, everyone envies me. Rodney, do you really mean that? Yeah, I mean it. I prefer beautiful women. But I couldn't bring myself to ask why he married Daisy in the first place. It's fine. I'll be reporting the affair to both of your companies. What? If you do that, we might lose our jobs. You should have thought of that before you did it. I said it loudly. Sierra seemed a bit shaken, but Rodney remained nonchalant. Hannah, you're so naive. An affair won't cost us our jobs. What? Unless it's a crime, an affair is a personal matter. It's a marital issue, so the company won't get involved. It's true the company might think it's unsightly. But an affair isn't grounds for disciplinary action. I later found out that unless there are specific internal regulations, generally, affairs don't lead to disciplinary action. Sierra laughed triumphantly. And Rodney smirked disgustingly. Well, that's the situation. The only thing you can do is break up with me, Rodney said to Daisy. Daisy looked down, seemingly frustrated. What are you so proud of? That's... Before I could finish my sentence, Daisy grabbed my arm. In a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz, Daisy said, It's okay, Hannah. If I can get away from Rodney, that's enough. In the end, Daisy got a settlement from Rodney through the divorce and left him. After that, Rodney apparently started dating Sierra. But I didn't care. I couldn't forgive Rodney nor Sierra. In place of Daisy, I vowed to seek revenge on the two of them. That was the only thing I was determined about. For years had passed since then. I never forgot about them for a moment. The stage is set, now, brace yourselves. On a certain holiday, I made up my mind and headed to a boutique in a bustling district. As I entered the store, I heard a female salesperson's voice. But I ignored it and approached two customers. It's been a while. Sierra. When I spoke, the woman turned around. What? Hannah. The surprised shopper was Sierra. Rodney next to her also turned around. Oh, it's Hannah. You haven't changed much, or should I say, still unpolished. I was irritated, but getting angry here would ruin the plan. I kept my cool and continued. Both of you seem well. Sierra, have you gained a bit of weight? What? No way. I'm pregnant. Sierra retorted. This reaction was as expected. This is where the Real challenge begins. I braced myself to continue, but before I could speak, Sierra said this. I'm pregnant, so give me $3,000. Laughing, Sierra extended her hand. I instinctively brushed it away. There's no way I'm giving you that. And why does it have to be such a high amount? To my question, Sierra sneered. Cute kids cost money. You wouldn't understand. That kid's surely going to be cute like Sierra. Unlike someone, she's probably going to be a beauty. Sierra and Rodney burst into laughter. I felt like my anger was about to explode. I just couldn't bear it anymore. Unintentionally, the words I'd been holding back slipped out. Actually, about that kid. As soon as they heard my words, Sierra turned pale, and Rodney looked shocked. Things went a bit differently than planned, but you could say it's a smooth start. But the real revenge starts now. They'll have to pay for what they did to Sis. Let them cry all night after losing everything. Well, that still wouldn't be enough for me. They might as well enjoy themselves for now. Because those smiles will soon fade away. Smiling to myself, I distanced myself from the quarreling Sierra and Rodney. Then Sierra noticed me distancing myself. Pointing at me, Sierra raised her voice. Why would you say such a thing to Rodney? That child isn't Rodney's child, what's that about? Oh? But isn't it true? It's definitely Rodney's child. We got married after all that. Her loud shout drew the gaze of everyone in the store toward us. I glanced around a bit before stoking the fire further. Is that so? Then that child's father is one of your affairs, right? But As Sierra tried to retort loudly, Rodney cut in.
Stop slandering. This child is mine. Are you going to ignore the fact that your wife is cheating, Rodney?
When I questioned Rodney, his face turned bright red.
Don't lie without any evidence. You're just trying to stir up trouble. That's right. Stop messing around.
Sierra also retorted with a flushed face. It's about time, I thought, looking around.
Well, causing a scene in the store is troublesome, so let's leave it at that. What? You started this. You know what? I'll sue you for defamation.
Rodney laughed.
That's a great idea. We could probably get about $10,000 out of it.
Even Sierra agreed with Rodney's suggestion. I sighed and responded.
Suit yourselves. But what if I actually have the evidence? What? Do you really have evidence of Sierra's affair?
Well, who knows?
I'll tell you the answer when we meet next.
Bye for now. With that, I quickly left the store. Behind me, I could hear Rodney's shouting voice.
Hey! Wait! We're not done talking.
I pretended not to hear and quickly moved away from the store. A few hours later, I was at home while changing clothes. My phone rang unexpectedly.
I knew you'd call me.
I answered the phone with a small laugh. Immediately, Rodney's voice rushed in, speaking rapidly.
Hey! About Sierra's affair, is it true? Answer me.
He reacted just as I had anticipated. I couldn't help feeling pleased. Doesn't he realize it's a trap? I sighed softly and responded.
The child in her belly might be yours, but there's also a good chance it belongs to her lover. So, the affair is real?
You're free to think that. I answered provocatively. After a brief silence, Rodney spoke in a low voice.
You have evidence, don't you? If you want, I might even give it to you.
I had directly accused Sierra of having an affair. Meaning, Sierra would now be on guard, making it impossible to gather further evidence of her cheating. So the evidence I might possess becomes Rodney's only hope. He's thinking exactly as I planned. Considering this, Rodney responded.
What should I do? What are your terms? Money?
Of course not.
I just want revenge.
If you leave Sierra, that's enough for me. Needless to say, that was a lie. I have no intention of forgiving Sierra, nor Rodney. But for now, I'll pretend to cooperate with Rodney. Only for the sake of what's to come.
Understood. So I just need to leave Sierra, right? It's simple, isn't it? If you get evidence of Sierra's affair, you'll gain freedom and a settlement from the divorce trial. Yeah. Let's meet and talk somewhere. Then, how about this coming Sunday?
I suggested a restaurant in the entertainment district. It has private rooms, suitable for confidential conversations. After specifying the place, I hung up the phone. Immediately after, Sierra called.
What's the meaning of this, Hannah? Why didn't you answer my call?
I'm busy too. I can't be at your beck and call.
Don't act so high and mighty.
I could hear Sierra grinding her teeth. I almost laughed.
So, what are you going to do about it? Because of you, Rodney and I are fighting. That's not my problem. It's your fault, isn't it?
Sierra is to blame for the affair. That's what I meant to say. But Sierra didn't care about that. She retorted sharply.
When are you going to take responsibility? Or maybe I should really sue you. Is that something a friend would say? Too bad, we're not friends. You said so yourself.
Sierra raised her voice in anger. I distanced the phone slightly. And then responded with a sneer.
Oh right, that's what I said. You're really infuriating. I should have made you cry more when we were in elementary school.
Sierra was breathing heavily. I thought, this is it, and played my trump card.
Oh? In that case, maybe I should just throw this away? The evidence of Rodney's affair. What? Rodney's affair?
Sierra's tone changed. Smirking at her reaction, I continued.
I couldn't find evidence of your affair,
but I did get evidence of Rodney's.
What do you mean?
Today's incident was a ploy to anger Sierra and make her call me. The real target is Rodney, who betrayed Daisy. I'll give Sierra the evidence of Rodney's affair, so she can squeeze every penny out of Rodney through the divorce settlement. I made the whole thing up, but Sierra believed it.
All right, send me the evidence then. You want to meet and talk, right? How about this Sunday afternoon at a cafe?
Fine. Bring me the evidence then. I'll make sure Rodney pays. After hearing Sierra say that, I hung up the phone with a sneer. Then, the next Sunday, as the time to meet Sierra approached, I left the house.
The car's ready. Let's go.
Denny, who had left the house earlier, opened the car door. I got in with a smile. After getting out of the car, I headed alone to the cafe where we agreed to meet. Sierra was already there when I entered.
Sorry for being late.
That's fine. Just show me the evidence already. Sierra extended her hand. I looked towards the entrance. Seeing the person there, I smiled and said to Sierra,
Before that, a friend is here. Do you mind if he joins us? Is it your boyfriend? Denny, right? Close one. We're married now, so Denny is my husband.
Saying that, I gestured towards the entrance. Sierra also looked over, laughing. In that moment, Sierra turned pale. At the same time, a loud voice filled the cafe.
Sierra! You're back in the States!
A man approached from the entrance. He was slightly older than us, dressed in a suit.
What? Why is Alexander here?
Well, a friend wanted to introduce me to his wife. The man referred to as Alexander turned around. And there was Denny. Denny spoke to Sierra. Nice to meet you, I'm Denny, Hannah's husband. I brought your affair partner. Hearing those words, Sierra stood up. As she tried to flee, I grabbed her hand. What's the matter? He's your affair partner, right?
Introduce him, he's the father of your child in your belly? The child in your belly?
Alexander looked at Sierra's pregnant belly. Then he burst into joy.
You're pregnant with my child. That's why you said you were going abroad.
By the way, Alexander is definitely Sierra's affair partner. Moreover, Sierra lied about going abroad. In short, she was trying to hide her pregnancy and the birth of her child. Because it would be troublesome if a man who's not her husband showed up at the hospital. But then, Alexander realized something. He slowly asked Sierra.
Didn't someone mention me as your affair partner just now? No. It's about someone else.
Sierra started making excuses while getting flustered. So, I decided to step in.
It's all a lie. Sierra is married, and you are just an affair partner. Don't be fooled. Hannah! Don't stir up unnecessary trouble.
Sierra tried to grab me, but in that moment, Alexander intervened.
Sierra, what's all this about?
Well, it's... Sierra started to say something, but Denny interrupted by showing a photo.
This is Sierra's husband. The rest is for you two to discuss. We'll be leaving now.
Denny took my hand, and we left the cafe. Later, I heard the cafe turned into a battlefield. Meanwhile, Denny and I headed to a nearby restaurant. Just as we arrived, Rodney also showed up.
Perfect timing, but who's that guy? He's my husband, Denny. I remember you had a fiancé.
I didn't want to have a long conversation right there, as it could lead to complications. I hurriedly urged everyone to enter the restaurant. Inside, we were led to a private room in the back. But then, the waiter said something unnecessary. Your companion is waiting inside. He said.
Is there someone else inside? A lawyer? Well, kind of.
It wasn't entirely wrong. I casually answered and entered the private room. Immediately, a woman's shrill voice was heard.
I've been waiting for you, Rodney. What? Layla!
Rodney seemed utterly shocked, nearly collapsing on the spot. Denny quickly supported Rodney.
Then the woman called Layla spoke again.
Thank you for helping my fiancé. Well, it's nothing.
By the way, who might you be? Layla tilted her head. Her gesture was innocent as a young girl's. I felt it was cruel to make her cry, but I didn't hesitate to declare.
I'm Hannah, the sister of Rodney's ex-wife. And this is my husband, Denny. Oh, is that so? But why would the ex-wife's sister be here? Because I'm the one who invited you all here.
As soon as I said that, Rodney started to make a scene.
Shut up. Don't say anything unnecessary. I won't say anything unnecessary. I'm just going to tell her that you're already married.
The atmosphere froze at that moment. But I continued calmly.
After leaving my sister, Rodney remarried my best friend. Quiet. Don't say anything more.
Rodney continued to cause a commotion. Then Layla raised her voice.
Please be quiet. We're in the middle of a discussion.
Overwhelmed, Rodney closed his mouth. Seeing this, I continued.
Then, hiding the fact that he was already married, he started a relationship with you.
I narrated Rodney's current situation, his infidelities, and everything else. And ended with the fact that Rodney's current wife, Sierra, was pregnant.
So, you're saying I was being cheated on? Layla asked. Well, yes, that's how it appears. Regardless, it's good timing. My father is also here, so we can have a thorough discussion.
Layla gestured behind her. Looking back, there was a man with a fiery red face. So, that must be her father. I thought, and then Layla suddenly raised her voice.
You do know my father is a lawyer, right? Rodney, are you prepared?
Layla glared sternly at Rodney. Rodney, slightly intimidated, began to make excuses.
It's not like that. My wife Sierra has been cheating, and I was planning to divorce her. So, you're not yet divorced? No. I mean, that's enough. I will sue you,
Layla declared, and at that moment, Layla's dad grabbed Rodney.
So you're the father? Nice to meet you.
Rodney tried to smooth things over with a greeting. But it was futile. The room erupted into chaos, so Denny and I retreated outside. There, I told the staff who had rushed over due to the commotion.
There's a disturbance inside. Please call the police.
With that, the staff member called the police. The police arrived promptly. Later, we were also questioned, but ultimately it was treated as a family dispute and ended with a stern warning. However, while most were let off with that, it was not the end for Rodney. The police involvement became a problem at his workplace. Of course, the cause of the disturbance was thoroughly investigated. As a result, the affair came to light. Naturally, an affair alone would not lead to dismissal. But the company took issue with the police involvement. In the end, Rodney was pressured to submit his resignation and reluctantly left the company.
It's your fault. What are you going to do about it? If you feel bad, lend me some money. If you keep bothering me, I'll call the police, okay?
After that, he never contacted me again. It seems he really learned his lesson. Later, Rodney was sued by Layla and had to pay a hefty settlement. Sierra also had troubles with Alexander. Though she avoided a lawsuit, she was still required to pay compensation. Burdened with debt, Rodney and Sierra blamed each other and decided to divorce. They're now engaged in a bitter divorce battle. I doubt either will get any money in the end. By the way, to cover the legal costs and living expenses, they're both working at a well-paying construction site. I hope this time they truly reflect on their actions. Meanwhile, I reported the whole saga to Daisy over the phone.
That must have been tough. Are you okay, Hannah?
I'm fine. So, sis, just focus on delivering a healthy baby. Actually, after her divorce, Daisy remarried a former classmate she met at a reunion. She moved far away, but we still keep in touch frequently. Daisy is due to give birth soon, and thinking about it made me want a child too.
Maybe I'm pregnant too?
I gently stroked my stomach.
It felt a bit warmer than usual.
Today, we're having a Christmas party with 20 family members. Make sure you don't embarrass me.
I was filled with questions at Kieran's statement. The Christmas party was supposed to be at Kieran's brother, Tommy's house. Soon after, my father-in-law Brent and mother-in-law Annie arrived. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they looked furious, like they were about to face a demon. Then, Annie shouted Kieran and stormed back into the living room. There, Brent grabbed Kieran by the collar, and the next moment, a loud noise filled the room. My name is Emma. I'm a 31-year-old housewife. I married Kieran when I was 28. We met at a cafe we both frequented. We were regulars who knew each other by face and greeted when we met. It was just that until one day, when the cafe's popular dish was down to the last one, Kieran let me have it. Kieran is a big guy with a loud voice to match. He's assertive, but he was shyly offering me the dish that day. His bashfulness contrasted with his size, which I found adorable. Looking back, I was too naive. We exchanged numbers and went on a few dates. Our first date was for steak, and on the next one, he took me, in my casual outfit, to a fancy restaurant, a bit out of place. Kieran can be inconsiderate, making decisions without consulting others. He works at a major electronics company, where he's known for being the fastest to get promoted among his peers. He's proud of his work, which often leads to him acting on his own. Love is blind, they say, and I mistook Kieran's assertiveness for masculinity, which I now deeply regret. On our third date, Kieran proposed to me. It felt too soon, but he had already booked a wedding venue. Before I could even respond, I was shocked by his initiative. Eventually, his persistence led to a whirlwind marriage just a few months after we met. My parents were surprised too, but, like me, were overwhelmed by Kieran's forcefulness. He wanted me to quit my job right after getting married, but it was all too sudden, and I couldn't leave my job. I told Kieran I'd work until I got pregnant, and he reluctantly agreed. He was the type who preferred his wife to be a housewife. The first year of our marriage passed without incident, and it was a happy one. However, Kieran still made decisions unilaterally, from buying a car to choosing our new home without consulting me. I had dreamed of seeing the aurora borealis on our honeymoon, but next thing I knew, we were eating pasta in Italy. If I ignored Kieran's selfishness, it was a happy life. But everything changed when I found out I was pregnant after a year. It felt less like tumbling down a hill and more like being on a roller coaster. As promised, I quit my job to focus on homemaking. To our surprise, I was pregnant with twins. Kieran, deeply moved, looked forward to being a dad to 2 kids at once. He was so proud that he even bragged about it at work. His phone wallpaper was the ultrasound image of the fetuses, which he showed off everywhere. I secretly found it in poor taste, but I kept quiet. The thought of twins made me more anxious than happy. Kieran, on the other hand, was over the moon and seemed indifferent to my worries. The obstetrician advised a hospital stay due to the risks of a multiple birth, which Kieran agreed to. He must have been worried about what could happen. Hospitalization was a relief for me, but it brought new worries about household matters. Kieran didn't do housework. Being the eldest of 3 brothers, he had never had to. It wasn't just that he didn't, he couldn't. The fact that his family lineage was well respected and he was a direct descendant had spoiled him. He had always had someone to take care of even his personal needs. It seemed someone had been helping out not just with the household chores, but even with personal care. I couldn't possibly leave Kieran alone at home in that state. The thought of tidying up the house after being discharged was something I felt I couldn't possibly manage. So, I asked Brent and Annie for help. I requested them to either have Kieran stay at their house while I was hospitalized or to have Annie take care of our home. I get along well with both Brent and Annie. The typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict doesn't apply to us. Despite coming from a distinguished family, they're very down-to-earth and easy to talk to. The typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict doesn't apply to us. Kieran ended up staying at his parents' house until I was discharged from the hospital after giving birth. I checked into the hospital, feeling relieved. Under the care of the doctors and nurses, I safely delivered twins through a cesarean section. A healthy boy and girl, both crying loudly. When it was time to leave the hospital, Kieran, Brent, Annie, Kieran's siblings and their families, and my parents all came. We were a large family of 10. The nurses and doctors were surprised to see such a large group. They commented on how happy our family seemed. To an outsider, we must have looked like a happy clan. Although I felt a bit embarrassed by the commotion, I was secretly pleased. That moment was the peak of my happiness. But life became challenging from there. Kieran's attitude changed drastically. My life before and after giving birth were polar opposites. And not for the better. Issues I had noticed before became more pronounced, and any endearing qualities he might have had disappeared. This change started when Kieran returned home. The first thing he said was,
"There's nothing like being in your own home." As he stretched out comfortably.
I stretched myself too thin, indeed. I, too, thought my home was the best. But here I am, with twins in a baby carrier and bags in both hands. Thinking about the life ahead, there's just no way I can afford to stretch myself thin and relax. Brent, Annie, and my parents had all kindly suggested that we spend some time alone as a family. My parents live about 2 hours away by train, so they decided to stay in a hotel for the night. I suggested they stay with us to save the trouble, but they insisted on going to the hotel directly from the hospital.
It was nice being at my parents' home, but Mom could be really nagging after a while.
Kieran threw the baby care items we got from the maternity ward onto the floor and slumped down on the sofa. Then, astonishingly, he demanded, "I want a hot coffee." With both my hands full, and even one baby against my chest and another on my back, Kieran had the audacity to ask for coffee. And not just any coffee, but hot coffee at that. How does he expect me to set up the coffee maker and pour it into a cup in this state? And he was even complaining about his shoulders being sore, rotating them as if he was the one in need of care. I decided to ignore his request for the moment, and gently laid the twins down in their crib next to the living room. That's when I felt a dull pain in my abdomen. The cesarean section wound hadn't fully healed yet. My body stiffened from the pain, and my expression contorted. But Kieran didn't even glance my way, absorbed with his mobile phone. Raising my voice at Kieran would only risk waking the twins. And I was still too weak from the hospital stay. After putting the twins to sleep, I chose to remain silent, prioritizing their sleep and my recovery. Kieran showed no interest in either household chores or childcare. It was a stark contrast to just a short while ago when even the nurses envied our happiness. Now, all I felt was anxiety. The next day, my parents arrived early. And by the afternoon, Brent and Annie had also come to help. The 4 of us, along with the 2 sets of grandparents, began the challenging task of caring for the twins. Kieran, as expected, was of no help at all. In fact, he required more attention than the babies themselves. While dealing with Kieran on the side, I devoted myself to learning the ropes of parenting. Annie reassured me, saying that this is the time when the children teach you to be a mom. It was hard to believe that someone as supportive as Annie was Kieran's mother. My parents live farther away than my in-laws, so my mom can't visit as easily. It looks like we'll be relying more on Brent and Annie. Brent is still working, so we'll mainly depend on Annie. I'm really grateful that Annie is such a kind person. Both Brent and Annie adore the twins. Even when I'm clumsily changing diapers, they tell me not to rush and are very supportive. Amidst this, Kieran was the one who became sullen. He felt left out as we were all focused on the twins. He became more demanding than usual, asking for water, wanting to read the newspaper, or saying he was hungry. Brent tried to engage Kieran in parenting, saying, "It can be hard for dads to get involved in childcare, but it's rewarding once you try." Annie is kind, but Brent is also a good person. I wonder how someone like Kieran could come from such great parents. My dad also shared how nervous he was when he first took me out, trying to relate to Kieran. But Kieran showed no interest in these valuable lessons. All that came out of Kieran's mouth were disinterested responses like, "Oh, really?" Brent and my dad's stories were meant to ease the embarrassment and anxiety of making mistakes, a kindness towards Kieran. However, Kieran seemed uninterested even in their stories. Then, Kieran went too far. Not only did he show no interest in childcare, but his selfish behavior finally made Brent and Annie angry. While I was breastfeeding the twins, Kieran came up to me, asking if the food ready yet because he's hungry. Moreover, he insisted on having a proper meal, not just any frozen food. As I was bewildered, wondering what he expected me to do while I was in the middle of breastfeeding, Brent stepped in to offer his help.
"You're not a child. If you're hungry, make something yourself."
Brent's statement was completely reasonable. Yet, Kieran became visibly angry.
"You're a housewife, so it's only natural you should cook."
"I rarely use frozen food in the meals I prepare." But to Kieran, even one frozen item meant I was cutting corners. Annie joined the argument as well.
"Babies can't make and eat their own food."
Brent further suggested that since Kieran could also feed the baby with formula milk, he should take a turn at feeding. Faced with unanimous criticism, Kieran made a shocking statement.
"If I do the feeding, then there's nothing left for the mother to do."
This comment left Brent, Annie, and my parents dumbfounded. All I could do was sigh. Afterward, Annie relentlessly lectured him, and Brent thoroughly taught him childcare tasks like changing diapers. Kieran's face during this time was sullen, clearly showing his reluctance. 2 years passed, and I became pregnant again. Kieran hadn't changed at all during these years. I was constantly busy with the twins and household chores. Without Brent and Annie's help, our family life would have fallen apart long ago. Annie helped with the housework, and Brent tried to teach Kieran about parenting. Kieran, seemingly annoyed by his parents, found excuses to leave the house often. He claimed he was busy with work trips and overtime work, but it seemed he just didn't want to be home. This pregnancy wasn't twins, but my morning sickness was worse than before. I couldn't stand the smell of bread, so pasta became a regular meal. Kieran was unhappy about this too, constantly complaining about wanting bread. Annie, frustrated by his complaints, told him to make his own meals. Surrounded by Annie and Brent, Kieran reluctantly cooked. Regardless of how it looked, I tried to eat the meal he prepared. However, due to my morning sickness, I couldn't finish it. Kieran sighed dramatically at the sight of the leftover food.
"I went through the trouble of making this, and this is what I get? If it's too awful to eat, just say so."
After dropping this sarcastic remark, Kieran left the house. He returned an hour later. From that point on, Kieran completely stopped doing any housework or childcare. His excuse was that his efforts were a waste of goodwill. Unashamedly, on his days off, he started fishing as a hobby. On weekdays, he used work and socializing at work events as excuses to go to bars, coming home late. There were days when I didn't even see Kieran's face. I apologized multiple times about the meal issue and asked for his help around the house. Hoping he'd come home earlier on weekdays and spend some weekends at home was a modest request, I thought. I just wanted him to spend a little time with the twins. But Kieran's response was unbelievable.
"You've been raising the twins for 2 years. You must be used to it by now."
With that, he'd leave for fishing. And,
"This is your second pregnancy, and it's just one baby this time. There's nothing I can do."
He'd even say things like that. The twins, now 2 years old, haven't warmed up to Kieran at all, perhaps due to his indifferent attitude. In fact, they seem to dislike being around Kieran. They'd even start to cry if he just walked by. What I regret is wondering why I got pregnant with a third child. Perhaps I was fooled by Kieran's occasional whims of kindness. It's regrettable, but there's nothing I can do about it now. The baby growing inside me isn't to blame. Despite my frustrations, my pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and I was nearing full term. Like last time, I was scheduled for a cesarean section. The preparations for hospitalization weren't an issue, thanks to my previous experience. However, the due date being right after Christmas meant a busy holiday season. There would be a big Christmas party at the in-laws, which I'd likely miss this year. The biggest concern for this birth was Kieran. Now, there was the added responsibility of taking care of the twins. I needed Kieran's help. But I knew it was too much to ask for him to take time off work for the birth. So, to compromise, I asked if he could at least take care of the kids after work. His response was cold and devoid of kindness, saying he couldn't make such a promise. Then, Kieran said something even worse.
It's embarrassing for a man to take time off work for his wife's birth. It makes me look like a useless husband who's henpecked by his wife.
Unable to hold back any longer, I was about to retort when Kieran demanded food. His words immediately drained my will to argue. He continued to complain during the meal, upset by my request.
By the age of 2, they should be able to eat by themselves.
They might be able to eat, but they certainly can't cook. Kieran lacks the quality of thoughtfulness. Irritated, I couldn't help but respond.
Then you should be able to do more than a 2-year-old. Show them how it's done.
Unfazed by my sarcasm, Kieran said something even more outrageous.
I'm fine. You all live off my earnings.
How does that logic even work? Kieran's argument is far too flawed. Up until my hospitalization, he repeatedly reminded me that he was the one providing for me. I never intended to quit my job. It was Kieran who insisted I leave work to focus on household duties after we got married. Each time he says I'm providing for the family, I think to myself, you have no right to say that. With all these frustrations, the week of my hospitalization arrived. Then, Kieran made another insensitive comment.
Make sure you attend the Christmas party.
I couldn't understand why he would say such a thing. He was worried it would look bad if the eldest son of the family with direct lineage to respected ancestry attended alone. He had no understanding of the pain and risks involved in giving birth. Childbirth is a life-threatening endeavor. Kieran continued with unbelievable remarks.
Why should I be the only one to attend? Who's going to do the cooking and serve the drinks?
Was he mistaking me for a servant or a housekeeper? It was unthinkable to risk my life for the sake of Kieran's pride. It's astonishing what Kieran can come up with. Kieran and I repeatedly had intense exchanges of come and no, it's impossible. In the end, Brent talked to Kieran, and it was decided that I wouldn't attend. As Christmas approached, Kieran remained sullen, and it was the day before my hospitalization. Unfortunately, it also happened to be the day of the Christmas party. On the day of the Christmas party, I was experiencing some abdominal discomfort and was lying down beside the twins. Suddenly, I realized Kieran was standing there. Groggily, I looked up at Kieran.
Today, we're having a Christmas party with 20 family members. Make sure you don't embarrass me.
I wonder what Kieran is saying. I was filled with confusion at Kieran's words. The party was supposed to be at Tommy's house. Kieran sat down and shook my shoulder. He was demanding a meal for 20 people and desserts that the ladies would enjoy. It seemed Kieran had unilaterally decided to host the Christmas party at our house. Brent, Annie, and the rest of the family had been considerate about the twins and my pregnancy. I couldn't understand why suddenly 20 people were expected today. I hadn't noticed, but there were missed calls from Annie and Brent on my mobile phone. I was scheduled for hospitalization tomorrow. Labor could start at any time now. It was absolutely impossible to entertain 20 relatives under these circumstances. I told Kieran it was unreasonable to spring this on me suddenly. At the expense of paying a little more, couldn't we arrange for a catering service? I even humbly suggested. However, Kieran angrily raised his voice, insisting the party be at our house.
Are you trying to shame me? As the wife of the eldest son of a family with direct lineage to respected ancestry, you should maintain your dignity.
Kieran was imposing his selfish demands, continuing with outdated views that a wife should silently obey her husband. I lost the energy to argue back. When I fell silent, Kieran seemed to take it as agreement, smiling smugly. He then announced he was going to pick up the relatives and told me to prepare for the party before leaving. Given how everything was arranged, I couldn't possibly refuse. It would inconvenience all the relatives. With that thought in mind, I began to get ready, despite my large belly. I texted Kieran to let him know that going shopping was out of the question and I'd have to make do with what we had. I had stocked up on groceries considering my upcoming hospital stay, so using them up wouldn't be an issue. Despite the discomfort from my tight belly, I managed to prepare the meals. We were short on drinks, so I decided to order them and get it delivered. Just as I finished all the preparations, Kieran texted to say he was on his way home. In just 2 hours, I had prepared the food and drinks. I wished I could pat myself on the back. The twins were getting sleepy, so I put them to bed in another room. Soon, I heard the front door open and lively voices. I went to greet everyone. Annie and Brent expressed their concern, asking me if I was okay. The call earlier was probably made out of concern for me. I could only respond with a vague smile and tried to brush it off. The living and dining areas were packed with 20 guests, and the Christmas party began. I was so busy serving food and drinks that I didn't have a moment to sit down. Everyone kept asking if I was okay, but I just laughed it off. Kieran, on the other hand, was in a good mood, boasting about my resilience. However, Brent, Annie, and Tommy looked worried. Standing continuously while preparing and moving around to pour drinks made the tightness in my abdomen increasingly unbearable. Eventually, I excused myself to check on the children, using it as a reason to leave the room. Watching the twins sleep, I too fell asleep. Sometime later, what felt like tightness turned into pain. Not wanting to worry anyone, I covered my mouth with my hands. The pain in my belly grew sharper and more intense. It had been 3 hours since Kieran sprung the Christmas party on me. As I endured the pain, suddenly the door opened. And there stood Tommy, seemingly having mistaken the room for the bathroom. "Sorry, I mistook this for the bathroom." Saying this, Tommy closed the door and hurried away. Soon after, Brent and Annie arrived. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they looked furious. The next moment, Annie shouted for Kieran and stormed back into the living room. I weakly stood up and returned to the living room as well. There, I saw Brent grabbing Kieran by the collar, and the next moment, a loud slap echoed through the room. Kieran's cheeks are turning red. Brent slapped Kieran on the cheek. Brent's eyes were sharp, and his usually gentle face looked demonic. Even I, who wasn't being scolded, flinched in fear. Kieran, shocked, was frozen in place.
What the hell are you doing?
Kieran flinched at Brent's loud voice. The relatives who had been enjoying their drinks fell silent and turned to look at Kieran.
Do you understand what condition Emma is in?
Annie glared at Kieran with a demonic intensity. One of the relatives noticed me and offered me a seat on the sofa. Words of anger were directed at Kieran from the other family members. "You said the birth was still far off, but she's about to give birth, isn't she?" "I thought you said she was in the stable period," someone commented. It seemed Kieran had convinced the relatives that my delivery was still far off. He had told Brent and Annie that there were no signs of labor yet, which is why my hospitalization was postponed. Disdain filled the room as everyone started looking at Kieran with contempt. Relatives with children around the twins' age expressed their disbelief. Women were saying things like, "I can't believe this." If I were in her shoes, it would be unforgivable. What a terrible husband. There were also apologetic voices saying they were sorry for not knowing, feeling deceived by Kieran. The atmosphere was far from festive, resembling more of a funeral. Unable to withstand the mood, Kieran started making strained excuses.
She's always making excuses about taking care of the twins or being pregnant, or saying it's too close to the delivery to do any housework.
Everyone turned their attention to Kieran, wondering what he was trying to say.
That's why I made her prepare food for 20 people today, and even serve drinks.
I couldn't make sense of his words. And I'm sure everyone else was even more bewildered. Yet, Kieran continued.
She hasn't done anything up until now.
This is hardly enough to make up for it. The revelation that he made me cook for 20 people caused an uproar among the guests. Kieran, faced with their condemnation, began to sweat. A female relative suggested they disband immediately, and people started to clean up. The twins crying could be heard from the back. Brent and Annie went to check on them. Tommy, who has a child about the same age as the twins, looked at Kieran with disdain.
That's despicable,
Tommy murmured quietly. Kieran was belittled by everyone as both a husband and a father, shrinking smaller in their presence. His usually assertive and arrogant demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my belly. The intervals between the pains seemed to be getting shorter. It was likely that labor has started. I tried to speak to Kieran, who was being scolded and had shrunk down. But he was unresponsive in shock. Someone asked if they should call the hospital for me, and I nodded slightly. Another person handed me a phone. And when I called the hospital, they told me to come in immediately. I announced to everyone that I was heading to the hospital and tried to stand up, but I couldn't get up. Tommy suggested calling an ambulance, and at that, Kieran finally reacted.
If you're calling an ambulance, tell them not to use the siren. It'd be embarrassing if the neighbors found out.
I couldn't believe Kieran was more concerned about appearances than my condition. Amidst the stunned silence of everyone, Kieran continued.
If you're going, go by yourself. It's your fault the mood was killed anyway.
It wasn't my fault at all, it was due to Kieran's lies. Everyone must be thinking the same. Amid the astonishment of everyone present, another loud sound was heard. Before anyone realized, Annie, who had returned, slapped Kieran on the cheek. Kieran clutched his face, tears welling up in his eyes.
I never thought you could be so morally corrupt. Giving birth is a matter of life and death.
Standing behind Annie, Brent was holding the twins, one in each arm.
The pain Emma has endured is nothing compared to this.
Brent, too, seemed furious, his arms trembling as he carefully placed the twins on the floor.
It's not my fault. I'm the one providing for everyone here.
Kieran insisted that I was to blame for embarrassing him in front of everyone and that he was faultless. Even in such a moment, Kieran's sense of elitism was evident. Naturally, no one sympathized with Kieran. My Sael, Caitlin offered to drive since she hadn't been drinking, raising her hand. The room erupted in cheers. The decision was made for Caitlin to drive our car, and everyone quickly started moving. Some to fetch my hospital bag from the bedroom, as directed by Annie, and others to tidy up, with Brent collecting the empty dishes. Kieran alone, rubbing his slapped cheek, was fuming, muttering that if it weren't for Dad and Mom, he'd be pressing charges. Perhaps embarrassed and his pride wounded, Kieran's face turned beet red. Moreover, even his ears turned red, indicating he must have felt quite humiliated. The commotion woke the twins, who started crying loudly. With the women busy tidying up, the men took turns trying to soothe the twins. Kieran didn't lift a finger to help. And everyone else seemed to have given up on him. At that moment, I felt utterly fed up with Kieran. I honestly thought I no longer needed such a useless partner. It was Tommy who stepped in to entertain the twins, saying he often played with his own kids and started playing with them. He said that he's used to playing with his kids at home, so you can leave it to me. With that, he started playing with the twins. With support, I stood up and informed him that there were toys in the children's room and that the kids had no food allergies. I also told them to feel free to use any food from the fridge. Kieran kept muttering to himself that he wasn't wrong until the end, but I ignored him and headed for the entrance. Caitlin then drove me to the hospital in our car. Upon arrival, a nurse immediately called for a doctor, who took me to the delivery room. It seemed I was close to giving birth, given the intervals of my contractions. Sure enough, as soon as I was on the delivery table, I gave birth. It was a relief that it was an easy delivery. However, the one who I truly felt sorry for was Caitlin. Unable to leave, she ended up having to stay until the next morning. The day after I safely gave birth, Annie and Brent came to the hospital with the twins. After the incident, Kieran had sulked in a corner of the room, drinking beer from a can. Brent took Kieran to the bedroom, not wanting the children to see their father being scolded. Out of the twins' hearing, Brent reportedly scolded Kieran all night long. Kieran seemed to have lost all his spirit. Brent shared yesterday's events with a wry smile. Eventually, Kieran came to my hospital room. In front of Brent and Annie, he was meek and quietly apologized for his actions the day before. The impact of being hit by both Brent and Annie seemed to have deeply affected him. They kindly left me alone with Kieran. But his attitude changed immediately.
"It's your fault I got hit by Dad and Mom."
He went on to complain about my shortcomings and lack of consideration. At that point, I was utterly fed up with Kieran. I firmly decided to divorce him then. Despite the apprehension of becoming a single mother with 3 children, I knew I couldn't stay with Kieran any longer. Without hesitation, I pressed the nurse call button. A nurse came right away. And soon after, Brent and Annie returned to the room, wondering what was happening.
"This man is a stranger to me.
Please ask him to leave." The nurse looked bewildered, but Annie seemed to understand. She promptly escorted Kieran out of the room. With Kieran in tow, Brent and Annie left the hospital. As they were leaving, they mentioned that my parents would visit in the afternoon. True to Annie's words, my parents arrived in the afternoon. I shared the events of the previous day and my decision to divorce Kieran with them. My parents initially thought Kieran had been unfaithful when they heard about the divorce from Annie. They had been under the impression that divorce always involved infidelity. They couldn't have imagined that a heavily pregnant woman was forced by her husband to prepare for and serve at a Christmas party. I took my time, explaining the circumstances to my parents intermittently. Not only did I talk about being made to prepare meals for 20 people and being forced to serve drinks, but I also shared, through tears, how hard it had been and how much I had endured up until now. As they listened, my parents cried with me. By the end of our conversation, we were all smiling through our tears. My mom gently suggested I recuperate at their home after the hospital. I was discharged without issue and have been resting at my parents' house since. Regarding the divorce, Brent and Annie agreed there was no reason to oppose it. The only one who was vehemently against it was Kieran. He tried to contact me numerous times. But I blocked his calls and informed Brent and Annie not to let him contact me. Without me to serve almost as a servant, Kieran seemed to have lost his mental stability. Living alone, he couldn't keep the house tidy, and it became cluttered with trash. At work, he vented his frustration through power harassment, nearly facing disciplinary action from HR. Despite this, his behavior persisted, extending even to clients and partners, eventually leading to his dismissal. By then, it seemed no one sympathized with him. Currently, Kieran is re-educating himself on human decency while working on the family farm. Kieran apparently often cries, saying that the home he shared with me was his oasis of peace. I heard all of this from Annie, who has been in touch with me. But for me, that home was nothing but a desert. With Brent and Annie's help, my divorce from Kieran was finalized smoothly. The house we lived in was sold, and I received the entire sum from the sale as compensation in the divorce settlement. I decided to live with my parents. I still keep in touch with Brent, Annie, and Tommy. Sometimes, the twins ask to see Caitlin and Tommy, who happily play with them. For Brent and Annie, the twins are still their grandchildren. They visit whenever they can, enjoying their time with all 3 kids, who affectionately call them Grandpa and Grandma. The children have also grown fond of Grandpa and Grandma. Looking back, if it weren't for that Christmas party, I might not have made it to the hospital. Kieran alone couldn't have managed both the hospital trip and caring for the twins. In a way, that incident helped me come to terms with my situation with Kieran. It's odd, but I find myself grateful to Kieran for hosting that Christmas party at our home. Life is unpredictable. I'll never forget the kindness of those who helped me during that time. With my 3 children, I aim to find even greater happiness and hope to offer help to others in return.
I wish I never had a daughter.
My mother Chloe screamed hysterically.
Once you're in high school, you're out of here.
My father David threw things as he spoke. Our younger brother Daniel, years apart, looked at us with a mocking sneer. This house is like a dwelling for demons. Even without a place to go, we must leave soon. For the sake of my precious sister Sophia and my own life. My name is Amelia. This spring, I joyously turned 40. When I was about 20, I thought being in my 40s was ages away, but after turning 25, the countdown of age seemed to speed up. But back in my teens, every day felt endlessly hellish. I have a twin sister, Sophia. Our family runs a small chain of restaurants in the city. Well, it's just about 3 restaurants, nothing grand. It's not an age-old family business. It expanded to 2 under my grandfather and just 1 more since my father took over. Once you step out of the local area, almost no one knows our restaurant's name. Our small restaurants hardly stand a chance against the big chains. Yet, my parents always had this strong sense of being business-owning family. My father was saying so, especially when it came to the issue of succession. My parents unusually desperate, even from a child's perspective.
First off, as twins, we were always told, you'll be future star CEOs just for being twins. Grow up beautiful.
Thus, from a young age, we underwent rigorous beauty care. It would have been better if we were plain, but unfortunately, we inherited good looks from our reasonably attractive parents. Under their educational policy, we had our eyebrows neatly done as soon as we were aware, and my mother would apply lotion to our skin every day after bath. I wonder now if slathering all those chemicals on a young child's skin did more harm than good. On top of that, we had our own beautician by the age of 5. Unbelievable, right? I've never heard of anyone else having this, but it's true. I couldn't share this with classmates without making them jealous. We were also under strict weight management, hardly ever indulging in sweets or hearty meals as kids. My maternal grandparents, coming from a more typical employee family, tried to treat us with homemade dishes and snacks, but my father disapproved and my mother followed suit. Consequently, we became distant from my maternal grandparents. Due to differing educational views,
Don't interfere anymore.
our parents would lash out. We had lessons too, piano, ballet, and skating as well, since it could connect us with rich heiresses. We were never pampered. To our parents, we were products for the future. Everything was for the sake of expanding the business. As a child, I didn't realize this and genuinely believed, I'm loved by my parents. Their strictness is a sign of love. Someday, I'll take over the business and make them happy. Sophia thought the same. But then, a life-changing event occurred. When we were in elementary school, a baby brother was born. Named Daniel, he was the only boy in the family. Seeing him,
A boy is more suitable for succession.
our parents decided. So, they shifted their focus entirely to him, stopping all our lessons and even the strict beauty regimen. The beautician was gone. That would have been fine. But then one night, I overheard my parents talking.
I never really wanted a daughter. I thought twins would be good for publicity, but if it's a boy, I couldn't care less.
Yeah, I agree.
A woman isn't suitable to take over the company. All our shop managers are men, and it's better if men are in charge. When you think about it, having 2 daughters is just a waste of money.
What should we do about it, then? They were talking about us as if we were just some bulky trash they needed to get rid of. Up until then, I had convinced myself that their recent coldness was just because they were busy with our little brother. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. After that conversation, I slowly began to notice a change in how they treated us. First, we were forbidden to go out and play with friends on holidays. My mother explained, you could get hurt. But we always ended up helping at the main shop on holidays. In essence, we were being used as pieces of the household to prevent us from going out and playing. It must be a strategy thought up by our parents to make up for lost time. When we served food to the customers,
What cute twins! Good for you, helping out.
they would say, there's nothing praiseworthy about it. We were being forced to do it. My parents, getting carried away with the situation, started making us work in the shop on holidays, doing simple waitressing, and eventually even had us sing and dance to popular songs. We're known as the lovely little sisters, and needless to say, our popularity brought more customers to the shop. But nobody realized that our freedom was being sacrificed behind the scenes. On weekends, we were sent to the shop. Don't let your grades drop. It would look bad. And on weekdays, despite being elementary school students, we had to study late into the night. We couldn't slack off in practicing the songs and dances for the shop. Our overly packed schedule, like that of an unreasonable full-time employee, left us exhausted every day. Perhaps due to fatigue, or maybe stress, our adolescent bodies, despite not eating much, started to gain weight easily. Once our parents realized we were of use to them, they became fussier about our appearances.
Make sure you manage your weight,
they would say, giving us mostly vegetables, typical of what a model would eat. Although we were never denied food, such a diet was too healthy for a growing teenager. Because of this lifestyle, there were times in middle school when I missed my periods. Meanwhile, my brother Daniel, who had been doing karate since he was young, didn't gain weight easily. He was treated differently.
If you're going to be a future entrepreneur, you need to know good food.
And he alone ate high-quality ingredients. For a teenager, resentment over food is significant. The treatment from my parents, coupled with the disparity in meals between us siblings. It was enough reason to resent Daniel. I think it was only natural that the bond with Sophia would become stronger. One day, after dedicating our youth to the shop and house, and even beginning to resent our parents, my father called us.
It would be embarrassing if word got out that an idiot came from our house, so make sure you go to a high school with a good reputation.
He said so. It was the beginning of 8th grade in middle school. Despite barely managing our grades while helping at the shop, it was impossible to meet such expectations. I asked if at least we could be excused from helping at the shop, but he didn't listen.
Getting into a famous high school becomes a marketing slogan,
he said. There was no fighting back for a mere middle schooler.
If you end up in a low-tier high school, don't bother coming.
Threatened like this, we studied desperately. In the following year, my sister got into the high school our parents wanted, but I didn't. My father was furious, throwing things around, luckily not hitting anyone. But I was terrified he might hit Sophia, who was trying to protect me. My mother also holding her head.
Why has it come to this? Why are you so useless?
Hysterically yelled. It was like a scene from hell. Was it my fault for not getting into high school? Wasn't my effort worth recognizing? Only Sophia, who understood me, hugged and cried with me. Daniel, resembling our father, looked down on me as if to say, that's why women are. It was infuriating.
Why do you have to mess up my life?
My father said. If anyone was messing up a life, it was my parents messing up ours, but I couldn't say that.
Enough. The family heir is a man. We don't need women. Should have done this sooner. Listen, we'll pay for the tuition, but don't you dare come home. It looks bad. Once you two are in high school, both get out. Don't ever come back.
He slammed the newspaper on the floor. At that sound, Sophia and I flinched, looking at each other, tears in her eyes. We couldn't stay here. It wouldn't just be high school. College entrance would be the same. I was a bit weak today, but I am her older sister. Understanding my intention, Sophia nodded. Indeed, she's my other half in this world. Quietly holding each other's hands, we glared at our parents.
Understood.
And simply replied. My father said,
you'll come crying back, but I won't help.
But I thought I was not going to cry. A few days later, on the night of our middle school graduation, Sophia and I left home. For about 2 days, we slept in a park, but noticing a homeless person watching us with a creepy smile, we realized living on the streets wasn't feasible for 2 kids. There were no adults we could rely on. That's when the faces of our maternal grandparents came to mind. They had been estranged from us for scolding our parents about proper child rearing. Maybe they would be on our side, but our hope was dashed. Even after explaining our situation to our middle school and borrowing a phone from our former teacher to contact them, I'm sorry, but we don't think of her as a child anymore. We don't want to have anything to do with you guys either. We were rejected by our maternal grandfather, Andrew. Apparently, unbeknownst to us, my mother had been extorting money from them. It was understandable that they wanted nothing to do with us. Just when I thought nothing was going right, how about coming to my place? It might be cramped for 3. Our former teacher Scarlett offered. We knew if our parents filed a missing person report, it could jeopardize Scarlett's position because of us, runaway girls. But we also knew our parents wouldn't bother. Most importantly, there was no one else we could unconditionally trust and rely on. We said, "Please, teacher," with asking for shake hands. Sensing our tension, Scarlett joked a bit, "Understood," and smiled. Thus, a new life began for Scarlett and 2 of us. Even if you're a bottom-tier high school, you still pay tuition. Our parents said they'd pay for tuition, but in reality, we were treated as if we declined enrollment. They would have thought once we left home, it should be better to spend all the money on Daniel. We can't even go to school. As we were disheartened, Scarlett offered, "Can you do part-time? I wish I could cover all expenses, but it's a bit tough right now. I'll support you in other ways." Like this. Right. High school students can work part-time. We weren't like before. Realizing that, it seemed Sophia had the same thought. We don't need money. But could you help us with our studies? Scarlett was surprised at our request. Of course, but what will you do? We'll save money working part-time for a year. No, 2 years. Then we'll go to high school. But our studies might suffer, that's why we need you. You can rely on me for money. No, it's not that. Relying on you would feel like losing to our parents. It's probably just us, but we want to prove them wrong on our own. She was silent for a while, contemplating. It's understandable, we were planning to delay it for a year or 2, just out of spite for our parents. Was it the right resolve, or just childish stubbornness? After a pause, "All right," she said. A year later, Sophia and I worked multiple part-time jobs and, with Scarlett's advice, entered an online high school. It was cheaper and we could continue working. We also rented a room next to Scarlett's house. We didn't want to compromise her position by living with her continuously, though we never wanted to contact our parents again. "We need your consent to rent a house." We reached out. "As long as we don't see your faces, do whatever." And they agreed easily. In reality, we hardly lived in that room, mostly staying at Scarlett's place. But it was a necessary precaution. Scarlett helped pay some of the rent. We refused to let her pay it all. She supported us thoroughly, from studies to personal life. Though she was in her 20s and more of a sister, she had become our mom. Thanks to her, we graduated from high school and, despite a delay of about 2 years, made it to a fairly prestigious university. The support from Scarlett was invaluable. At university, Sophia and I had another goal besides graduating. That's why we attended university. That was starting a business. To gain the knowledge and qualifications needed, every day was filled with part-time work, not easy, but we were determined. 3 years after graduating, we finally opened Cafe and Bar ANS Delightful, serving coffee, sweets, pizza, and sandwiches during the day, and alcohol in a stylish setting at night. Cafe and bars weren't as common then, but it caught on, and within 5 years, we opened a second location. We did it, Amelia. Yes, we did. Sophia. We had been betting everything on this second shop long before it opened. Our plan was to establish credibility and confidence, then open this shop near our parents' restaurant. Because that's what I had decided. By chance, a property became available right across from their most cherished third shop, allowing us to open our second shop. It was the start of a delightful revenge. Not that we were doing anything special. We simply welcomed customers every day with all our heart. But our shop, run by the beautiful sisters, was already quite popular from our first location. Rumors spread that the popular sisters were temporarily at the second location. The place quickly filled up. Within 2 days of opening, we surpassed our sales goal, a complete success. Naturally, word got to our parents' restaurant. On the 7th day after opening,
They're mocking us.
our parents stormed into our shop during business hours. Exactly as we expected. The shop was buzzing. Some customers whispered, "Isn't that the owner of the shop over there?" Sophia and I, smiling, faced our father. "Please, quiet down, customer," calmly said.
Don't joke with me. What's this about? Why open a shop near mine? So selfish. Our customers are decreasing because of here. Sly and unbecoming.
Their words made us burst into laughter.
Where we set up shop is our choice, as long as we pay the rent, right? We're not joking around.
Exactly.
Calling us sly and unbecoming. Please don't spout such vulgar words in front of the customers.
Our overly calm only aggravated them more. After all, they had us working in customer service since we were kids. Controlling our emotions like this was easy. Then,
What an attitude towards your parents.
our father shouted, the shop stirred. Parents? What, a family feud? Curious and confused glances turned towards us. Parents?
You mean the ones who forced us to work in their shop as children and threw us out for not getting into the high school they wanted? Considering parents as those who treated their child as a product, enforcing weight control and stealing freedom?
Our words caused a murmur among the customers. That's terrible. Or, so that's the kind of person he is. I hear words like, some customers, who knew us from childhood, that place has been strange since they had a boy, commented. Our parents, realizing the tense atmosphere, turned pale.
No. That's not it. These girls are just rebellious. We only had them help in the shop for social learning.
Our father was explaining with an over-gesture to everyone, but it backfired.
I can't believe it. They must be telling the truth about their father. Isn't it a case for child services? Admitting they had to help is just ridiculous.
The customer's exchange was unstoppable, and he kept repeating,
That's not it.
but no one listened. Our mother,
I protected these kids.
trying to claim her innocence, said, "Could you please leave?"
You guys are disturbing the other customers.
I said, attempting to escort them out when suddenly,
Shut up.
our father raised his fist at me. I instinctively shrank back. Then,
Stop it.
an elderly man, who had been quietly enjoying his sandwich and coffee, intervened.
Enough. How embarrassing. You two are disturbing people's meals. Get out.
Other customers joined in.
That's right, get out.
I got a call asking me to leave.
What is it?
Angry, our parents were quickly escorted out by a burly customer. He whispered something in their ears, turning their faces pale, and they never came back in. The shop erupted in applause.
You all had it tough. We support you. Keep going.
Encouraged by these kind words, we said,
It's good to have a shop.
That's what I thought from the bottom of my heart. Later on, our shop became the talk of the town after the incident with our parents, leading to the closure of all 3 of their shops. It turns out, the elderly man who saved me from our father's punch was our neighbor. His spreading of the incident branded their chain as run by a violent manager, causing a loss of popularity. While their customers dispersed, many became our regulars, liking our shop, thanks to the elderly man. With our parents' business gone, Daniel, who had been groomed as the successor, was lost.
He blamed us for his ruined life and wreaked havoc at home,
giving our parents a hard time. Soon after, our mother called, pleading to at least employ him in our shop. Of course, we politely refused. Our shop, run by beautiful sisters, only hires beautiful-hearted people. We had no room for a brother like our father. By the way, both Sophia and I got married in our mid-30s. Continuing the business. Due to the twins, we both fell for the same customer inadvertently. Just as we braced for a sibling rivalry, it turned out they were twins too. They never came together, so we never realized. Each thinking, he seems slightly different today. Luckily, Sophia liked the older brother, and I liked the younger one, so crisis averted. Thanks God. Now, the shop is a family business, involving our husbands. Our children are not twins though. All they look so alike with each other as they could be siblings, the power of twin genes. We have no plans to train them for business, but seeing their interest in playing shop, they might be standing at the shop's front soon. What a joy that would be. As for our teacher Scarlett, she married around the time we opened our shop.
Now, you two are settled.
Saying so in her happy wedding, which was impression. Recently, her family has been visiting our shop, continuing our family's close relationship. We've repaid all the rent and support she gave us, but I still want to repay her in various ways. She was more than a mother, a sister, and a mentor. A person who gave us immense and warm love. Someday, we hope to return love to others, like she did. First, to guide our children towards a bright life. All right, let's keep up the good work today.